Idi Amin data. The name itself sends shivers down the spine of anyone familiar with African history. Known as the self-declared conqueror of the British Empire, Field Marshal of Uganda, and even the so-called last King of Scotland, Idi Amin ruled Uganda from 1971 until 1979 with a blend of terror, charisma, and theatrical showmanship. But here's something most people don't know. Idi Amin's obsession with aircraft was more than just about flying from one place to another. Planes became symbols of power, instruments of propaganda, and even tools of war and intimidation. In this video, we'll uncover how Idi Amin used aircraft to shape his dictatorship, how he manipulated Uganda's aviation industry, and how airplanes became part of both his rise to global notoriety and his ultimate downfall. Stay with me until the very end, because the way Amin fled Uganda by plane is a dramatic finale that feels like something straight out of a political thriller. Let's take off. Idi Amin wasn't just a dictator, he was a man obsessed with appearances. He wanted to be seen as powerful, modern, and larger than life. And nothing in the 1970s screamed modern power more than airplanes. While Western leaders boasted about flying Concorde or presidential jets, Amin wanted to show that Uganda could keep up. He built his image around military parades, staged performances, and grand arrivals, and planes played a starring role. In photographs, he often appeared in pilot uniforms, sometimes strutting around cockpits as if he were in command. Did Amin really fly planes? Number. But he loved pretending he could. For him, planes weren't just machines, they were props in his theater of power. However, Amin didn't just pose with airplanes. He reshaped Uganda's entire aviation scene to serve his image. When Amin came to power in 1971, Uganda Airlines already existed as a young national airline. But under his rule, it became something very different. Instead of being a commercial service for Ugandans, Amin used it as his personal fleet. He frequently commandeered planes, leaving paying passengers stranded while he and his entourage traveled. New aircraft were ordered not for economic logic, but to show prestige. Fokker F-27 turboprops for regional flights, Sud aviation caravels, and later Boeing 707s for international journeys. One of the most infamous examples, Uganda Airlines. Boeing 707 was often used by Amin for international shopping trips and foreign visits, sometimes carrying luxury goods and weapons rather than passengers. By the mid-1970s, the airline was drowning in debt and mismanagement. But for Amin, it didn't matter. The airline wasn't about passengers. It was about him. Planes projected prestige, military aircraft projected fear. Amin loved to showcase Uganda's air force as a sign of military dominance. With the help of Libya's Muammar Gaddafi and the Soviet Union, Uganda received aircraft including MiG-17 and MiG-21 jet fighters from the USSR, 1,000 Mi-8 helicopters for transporting troops, cargo aircraft used for logistics and rapid deployments. These planes weren't always used efficiently in combat, but they served a political purpose. They flew low over parades in Kampala, rattling the windows and reminding civilians who was in charge. They transported soldiers quickly to suppress rebellions in rural areas. They even intimidated neighboring states, as Amin boasted about Uganda's growing air power. In truth, much of Uganda's air force fell into disrepair due to poor maintenance. but the image of fighter jets roaring overhead was enough to keep many living in fear. But Amin also used planes not just to scare his enemies, but to charm the world. Idi Amin understood the drama of grand arrivals. He used Uganda Airlines and military aircraft as stages to present himself to the international community. On trips abroad, Amin ensured his arrivals were theatrical. His planes landed with fanfare, and he would descend the stairs in full military regalia, medals gleaming. He courted Arab allies, especially Gaddafi's Libya, flying frequently to Tripoli in Ugandan and Libyan planes. Middle Eastern support brought not only money but aircraft. Libya supplied jets and pilots to strengthen Uganda's weak aviation sector. Amin loved being photographed next to aircraft, and Ugandan newspapers published stage photos of him commanding fleets. This imagery was carefully crafted to make him look like a world statesman, even as Uganda slipped deeper into chaos. But sometimes, planes didn't just carry Amin to new allies, they carried international crises straight into Uganda. The most infamous aviation incident of Amin's regime came in June 1976. A group of Palestinian hijackers diverted an Air France Airbus A300 en route from Tel Aviv to Paris. The hijacked plane landed at Entebbe Airport in Uganda. Amin personally welcomed the hijackers and tried to present himself as a mediator, but in reality, he was exploiting the crisis to look powerful. For a week, the world watched as Entebbe became a stage of international terror. Over 100 hostages were held in the old terminal building, guarded by hijackers and reportedly protected by Ugandan troops. Then, in one of the most daring rescue missions in history, Israeli commandos carried out Operation Entebbe, also known as Operation Thunderbolt. Flying in under radar at night, Israeli planes landed, stormed the terminal, and freed most of the hostages. Amin was humiliated. Instead of being remembered as a mediator, he was seen as a dictator who collaborated with terrorists. This single event forever linked Uganda's aviation sector with terrorism and dictatorship. Amin's obsession with planes wasn't just political, it was personal. He frequently wore pilot uniforms, parading around as if he were a licensed aviator. He ordered photo shoots of himself inside cockpits and next to fighter jets. Stories circulated that Amin forced Uganda Airlines pilots to fly him exclusively, sometimes abandoning paying customers. At one point, Amin even dreamed of creating a massive presidential fleet, bigger than what most African nations had. But this was fantasy. Uganda's economy was collapsing, and most aircraft sat idle for lack of fuel or maintenance. Still, for Amin, aircraft symbolized untouchability. They were props in the theater of his cult of personality. By 1979, Amin's regime was collapsing under the pressure of Tanzanian forces and Ugandan rebels. Kampala was falling. The dictator, who once strutted across runways, now needed a plane to survive. Amin fled Uganda aboard a Libyan aircraft supplied by Gaddafi, first flying into Libya. Later, he relocated to Saudi Arabia, where he lived in exile until his death in 2003. The same airplanes that once symbolized his power and glory became the vehicles of his defeat and escape. It was a poetic ending. The skies that had made him look untouchable became the skies that carried him away forever. Idi Amin's relationship with aircraft was never just about travel. It was about power, intimidation, propaganda, and illusion. Through Uganda Airlines, he projected prestige, but crippled the economy. Through military jets, he projected fear, but lacked true strength. Through international flights, he projected global influence, but revealed desperation. Through the Entebbe hijacking, he projected power, but ended up humiliated. And through his final flight into exile, he proved that no dictator, no matter how mighty, can escape history. Idi Amin turned airplanes into symbols of his rule. But history shows that even the biggest aircraft can't carry a regime forever. Question for you. Do you think Amin's obsession with aircraft helped him look powerful or only exposed his weakness? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more incredible aviation stories from history.